Good morning.
Good
We are
morning.
back with our second episode of our Girl Scouts Love State Parks celebration this weekend. I'm Alyssa Yable. Thank you for joining us. This is also part of our Crawdad Derby with our partners from our Scenic Rivers program. So I have Heather Doherty with me today from our Scenic Rivers program. She's going to talk to you in just a minute. But I just want to point out before we get started, if you have questions, please use your Q&A box and let us know your questions there. Me and my coworker Jenna Winters, which if you were on our last program, you probably met Jenna, will be helping answer questions. And if you're a Girl Scout, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. We love our Girl Scouts. Please let us know your name and where you're from in the Q&A so we can say hi to you. I also have with me today Roger Toma, who is our Crawdad expert, and he is going to tell you so many fun facts about Crawdads. And I'm excited too because Heather is going to announce at the end who won the biggest Crawdad contest. So let me turn it over to Heather and we will go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you, Alyssa. I'm Heather Doherty. I work for the Ohio Scenic Rivers program. This is our third annual Mohican Crawdad Derby. We do this event to celebrate our Mohican River as one of our scenic rivers in Ohio. There's only 15 of them in the state of Ohio. It's a special designation for some of our best waterways in the state, and I'm thrilled that the Mohican is one of them. So is the Clear Fork, which is a tributary to the Mohican and runs through our Mohican State Park. So I am really thrilled that Roger is here with us today, despite many hardships with our technology. So I'm excited to introduce Roger in a moment. He is in the process of writing the Naturalist Guide to Crayfishes of Ohio. So he is writing the book on crawdads in Ohio, which I think is pretty amazing. With 23 species and maps, that's going to be coming out very soon. Roger was formerly at Ohio State University in the Midwest Biodiversity Institute. He's discovered 3 new species. So for all those young people out there who thinks that we know everything there is to know about the world and science and nature, that is not true. New species are being discovered all the time. Roger's done that, and he has also had a crawdad species named after him, discovered by Professor Raymond Jazeranak. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. It is Cambarus tomai, is the crawdad named after Roger. So I would love to turn it over to Roger to tell us everything we need to know about crawdads.
Good morning, students, young people. It's great to be here today. I love talking about crayfish. So everybody, well, I won't say everybody, most of you probably know what a crayfish is. You've been looking for them in the biggest crayfish contest, and they're little lobster-like animals. They're called crustaceans that live in our rivers here in Ohio and around all around North America. And there's over 400 different species of crayfish in North America. 23 of them can be found in Ohio. They live in streams, caves, lakes, wetlands, ponds. They even make their own homes, some of them, by burrowing into the ground. Some of you may have heard your uncles or aunts or mom and dad or somebody like that call them snake holes. And they can at times harbor snakes, but the holes are not made by snakes. The burrows that are made by crayfish, and the snakes come along later and take over the crayfish's hole. And quite rudely, they will frequently eat the crayfish before taking over his house. So not exactly a welcome guest, but occasionally these holes can harbor snakes. For the most part, not poisonous, but there is a species that is a rattlesnake that does occupy some crayfish burrows. So if you're ever in the Massasauga rattlesnake's territory, be very careful digging up crayfish holes. For one, the Massasauga rattlesnake is an endangered species. So anyhow, these little lobster-like things that we call crayfish, and they are directly evolved from lobsters over 300 million years ago, okay? That's before the dinosaurs evolved, all right? So these crayfish go way back in time. And over 300 million years, they've been evolving, and there's been a lot of species evolved here in North America. And as Heather said, I have found 3 species in Ohio that were undescribed, which means, you know, a scientist had not come along and given them a name and tried to figure out who they were and where they lived and what they did. So there's 23 in Ohio. 3 of those I have discovered, and one of them I've yet to put a name on. So we're still working on crayfish. Just yesterday, I sent a paper into a scientific journal describing a species of crayfish that I discovered down in Kentucky and Tennessee. So if you're ever driving with your mom and dad down I-75 and going through Kentucky, and just as you cross the border into Tennessee, that's where this new species lives. It's really a cool crayfish. It's deep blue, and it lives in burrows, like I was saying. So anyhow, here in Ohio, we have one crayfish that's very beautiful, that's blue. And you know what, Heather? I forgot to bring my live specimens up. If we want, I may have to run down and grab them real quick and at the end of this talk. But I think what I'd like to do right now is go over with our participants what makes a crayfish. I am going to share my screen right now, and if I can, where'd my screen go? Doggone it! I'm going to try and share my screen.
Roger, I can see it.
Can you see it?
You go, yeah,
Okay.
if you go to presenter view, we will be all set.
Oh, presenter view. Oh dear, how do I do that?
I think it's down at the, well, if you go to slideshow at the
To
top
my
there.
slideshow? Oh,
Do you see
this?
slideshow at the top?
Is this working for
There
you?
you go.
Do you see it?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Young people, students, moms and dads, et cetera, this is a picture of a crayfish, and we're going to do some labeling here. Okay, here's your crayfish, the full body picture, the top side of a crayfish. So the first thing I want you to notice is that on a crayfish, which is very hard to miss, there's a thing up here, and we call that the chelae. That's the pinchers of a crayfish, or the hand of a crayfish. And that is the first walking leg. That's the big pinchers that everybody's afraid of, but you have to be careful of when you catch a crayfish. Then right here is the second leg. And here, whoops. That wasn't supposed to happen. All right, I'm having a little issue here. Well, that is, we're gonna redraw that. Here's, oh dear, why is this happening to me, huh? Darn it. Okay, that's the, right there's the third walking leg. There's the fourth leg. And back here is the fifth leg. All crayfish have a total of 10 legs, 5 on each side, all right? Then another important thing that we want to talk about today is this area right here. That is the rostrum of the crayfish. All right, that little area there. And then this area right here on the back is what's called the areola, or it's a space between the gill chambers. So crayfish have their gills right here on the side of their body underneath their what's called their carapace. This is the outside skeleton of the crayfish. Crayfish are invertebrates and they have an exoskeleton. Okay, so the other thing is when we turn the crayfish over, up here in the front is where the crayfish's mouth is, and back here is a very important part of the crayfish. This is where you look to tell if you have a male or a female crayfish. All right, and we're gonna talk about that. So you turn your crayfish over and look at the bottom side to see if it's a boy or a girl. So try to remember those parts. The chela is important, the rostrum is important, and the what we call the areola is important. All right, for crayfish here in Ohio. So let's see if we can go to the next picture. So here's the boys are here. Whoops. Oh dear. What the heck happened? Something. I'm gonna have to go back here, gang. So here we go. So here's the male or the boy crayfish, and here's the female. The male has these little pleopods down here that that didn't work. That didn't do one. So anyhow, these pleopods here are the male, is a boy, and then this little area right here is a girl, and on the female, the eggs come out of this right here at the base of the legs. Right here is where the egg, the oviduct, is located. Okay, so all right, now the crayfish, when we identify crayfish in Ohio, we look at the rostrum right up here. All right, the rostrum can have little points on it like that. They look like little spear points or something. Little tiny spines on it, or it might not. Some species do not have those spines. All right, so that's an important thing for you to look for when you're looking at your crayfish. And here is the opening between the gill chambers called the areola, and sometimes it's very wide and sometimes it's very narrow depending on what kind of crayfish you have. A very narrow one means that the gills are very large, and the gills are very large in crayfish that live in those burrows in the ground because there's not a lot of air in there underground. So they need big gills to get as much air as they can. Then over here is the chela. If I can get my pointer to work again. Here's a close-up of a chela, the big pinchers or the hand, and on the chela there's a part. This part right here is movable. It can open up. This part here stays where it's at, and this one opens up, and that's how they pinch you. They open that up and they grab you. And then down here, this is what I like to call the palm, like the palm of your hand, right below your thumb. And there's little tubercles here, and those are important for telling which crayfish are what. And then these are pictures of the males, what we call gonopods, which come in many different forms, and some of them are specifically shaped to the particular species that you're dealing with. And this one is in a group of crayfishes in Ohio that are in what we call a genus, the genus Cambarus. And then this style is in a group of crayfishes in Ohio that we call Faxonius. And there's other types in Ohio to identify. But so let me see where I'm at now. We have a lot of different species in Ohio. Heather, are you there?
I'm here, Roger.
Yeah, I can't remember our outline right now. Was I planning, how much, let's see, 10, 16?
You're doing great. You have 20 minutes.
All right.
If you
And we
want to go
have
get
lots
some,
of, oh, sorry, I was going to say we have lots of questions too. So, and Heather can go over the winners of the Crawdad Derby if you wanted to get your live specimens, Roger.
Okay. Here's by the way, here's what used to be the most colorful crayfish in Ohio. I'm going to come back real quick with a specimen, a species that was just discovered in Ohio. And I'll show you in a second. Heather, take it away.
okay.
You're on,
All
Heather.
right. So while Roger is off getting his live specimens for us, I'm going to announce the winners of our Crawdad Derby. So as I mentioned a moment ago, the Mohican River is one of our scenic rivers. There's only 15 scenic rivers in Ohio. These are special rivers where we preserve some of our best water quality in Ohio. And by that, we mean there's lots of different plants and animals living there. So this picture we're looking at right now.
Heather, I'm not seeing the picture. Can you make sure you're in presentation mode?
Oh, okay. Sorry. You know what, Alyssa, I don't know how to do that. I'm sharing my screen. And that's not getting us there, huh?
Well, I can see your whole slideshow.
So is that what you're seeing my,
There you go.
Okay, great. All right, so here is the Clear Fork of the Mohican State Scenic River is where we usually host this event. So next year, hopefully we'll be live again and not doing this virtually. So the Clear Fork flows into the Mohican State Scenic River. It's beautiful. It's in the Mohican State Park. It's a great place to go hunting for crawdads. So if you're not sure where to get out and do this, I highly recommend this spot. So our goal with scenic rivers is to help communities protect the highest quality rivers in Ohio for future generations. Here's a map of where they are. The Mohican River, you can see it's kind of in the northeast side of central Ohio. It joins the Kokosing River, which is also a state scenic river, and flows into the Muskingum River downstream. So, for all those crawdad hunters out there, I hope you've been out looking for crawdads. If you're into crawdads and creeking, I think you would really enjoy our Scenic River Activity book, which features crawdads and lots of other bugs that live in rivers, like dragonfly nymphs. They live in rivers too. It's a baby dragonfly. There's lots of activities and puzzles and fun facts about all the critters that you would find living on the stream bottom. So to our contest, we had 51 entries, which is great. So I want to thank all the parents who went out and facilitated that. Getting your kids outside is such a powerful way of helping them form a bond with nature and learn to love it. And I think that's one of the best things that we can do in terms of helping make sure that these types of spaces continue to exist. We want our kids to be able to go play in the rivers and their kids too. So thank you for helping get your kids outside and submitting those entries. I do want to mention that our next session starting at 11 is going to be about keeping our water clean and what crawdads and other things we find in the river tell us about how clean our water is. So, all right, to the contest. The winner is Alexis Morris with a crawdad. Look at that thing, it's huge. The pinchers look really big. So Alexis, I'm really impressed. I'm not sure how I would feel about managing that animal. It's 6 inches and 1/8 long. Roger tells us it is an Appalachian Brook crayfish. So Alexis, congratulations and thank you for entering our contest. Alexis will be getting a pack of nature guides from field guides that our Division of Wildlife publishes. And Alyssa's going to put in the Q&A a link to where you can see those guides online. So I also want to mention we had a lot of entries and they were all really close. So determining the winner was a little difficult. I want to show some others that were runners up. This Todd O'Brien had a 6-inch crawdad. Dallas Passenger 6-inch crawdad. So it was a very tight race. Mitch and Starr, ages 6 and 8, had this beautiful crayfish. Roger tells us it's the virile crayfish. They caught it in Yellow Creek. Here are pictures of Mitch and Starr. They look unstoppable. So good job, guys. Thank you for submitting your entry. Here's another one. Excuse me. Just under 6 inches by Christian Sizemore. I wanted to include this one because this is the biggest crawdad caught by the youngest person, Patrick Sandusky, age 4, 5 5/8. That is impressive. I don't know if when I was 4 if I would have been up to that challenge. So I want to show just a few more pictures of some of our other contestants. And some of our younger contestants. This is Reece Lewis with his 4 3/4 inch crawdad. I loved this image. Gracie Gamma looks like she's having a lot of fun with her crawdad. And finally, Lucas Stang gets the award for the smallest crawdad find. It is size tiny. It is so fun to catch crawdads that little when they're just born. It's really fun. So, all right. So that is, if you're interested in learning more about scenic rivers, we're within the Division of Natural Areas and Preserves. You can follow OhioDNR and Ohio Division of Natural Areas and Preserves on Facebook and Instagram. So that is the end of my presentation. And hopefully we've got Roger back on with some of his specimens.
I am back.
All right.
I'm going to share my screen, I think, right? So that they can see what I've got. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So, let's see. Whoops. Why does it keep doing that? It's driving me nuts. All right.
Roger, we can see you.
Yeah, I don't. Is my screen sharing right now?
Not. You're sharing your desktop, not a window. But do you have live specimen that you can just hold up to the camera?
Yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to hold these things up to the camera. Okay.
Oh yeah, you don't have to share anything then. We can see you.
Okay, good. Now, most everybody, as you saw from the pictures, there was one very interesting specimen that I saw that was a burrowing species when I got a close-up look at it. Most everybody is used to seeing this as a crayfish. Okay, kind of brown. This is a big water crayfish. It's got a lot of little tubercles right on the palm right here. You can see these little, can you see all that? Is that showing up very well? Too much light, enough light? Is that good? Okay.
That is good. Maybe hold them up just a little bit higher. There you go.
So that's a big water crayfish. All right. And most of the crayfish in Ohio are generally brown or green, like this. So, but we had some real excitement this spring. We discovered a species of crayfish in Ohio, and we've been looking for it. Hold on a second. For over 40 years, okay? So if you've got a job and you're doing something, gang, and you think it's taking you too long to get it done, just think about this, the hunt for this crayfish. This crayfish has been found in West Virginia and Pennsylvania. It comes right up to the border of the state. And we thought it was in Ohio, or it could be in Ohio. And we've been looking for it, like I said, for 40 years. And we just found it this spring. A woman by Laura Hughes, by the name of Laura Hughes, discovered it. It's all blue. Can you see that? And it's got little orange tips on its pinchers, on the keely. All right.
Now we had Abigail ask a question: how rare are blue crayfish? So sounds like you might be answering that, Roger. But we also had people ask about different colors and why they're different colors.
Yes. Okay. Let's do the rarity thing first. It depends on the species of crayfish you're looking at. The brown ones frequently have a mutation that results in their losing some of their colors, and only the blue colors are left, and they are very rare. You only see them every once in a while, maybe every couple of years. On the other hand, if you've got a species like this, all of them are blue. Every single one is blue, and there are quite a few species in North America that are blue, and they are primarily things that burrow into the ground. And we believe that the blue color is a adaptation to living underground and only coming out at night. These burrowers only come out at night, and the blue color helps camouflage them so predators can't see them. Because there are a lot of animals that like to eat crayfish: birds, amphibians, mammals, fish, human beings. Everybody likes to eat crayfish because they're little packages of protein and energy. So we believe the coloration is to keep them camouflaged. And there's red ones, and there's blue ones, there's brown, there's green, there's speckled, there's striped. There's a lot of different kinds of colored crayfish. Okay, so this guy was found by Laura Hughes, who she's a biologist, but at the moment she was unemployed, and she was doing what you would call a citizen science project, where she was out looking for this crayfish, and she did that because she heard me give a talk about this and say there's this crayfish might live in Ohio and is beautiful and so on and so forth. And she went out and she contacted all of her friends and said, please keep an eye out for this crayfish. Well, this spring she got a picture from some friends who were out turkey hunting, and it was a husband and a wife, and when they were turkey hunting, they found one of these crawling around on the ground. They took a picture. They sent the picture to Laura. Laura asked them where they were at. And then she got in touch with me and 3 other crayfish biologists. There are more than one. There's more than one crayfish biologist out there. And we went on a crayfish hunt, and we hiked all over some hills in the area where this was found. And we knew what kind of habitat to look in, which was little tiny seeps like wet spots on hillsides. And we went to the area where they were turkey hunting, and we searched all day long, and we finally found the populations of this little crayfish. So that was a big discovery. It's not an undescribed or new species. It's a new record for Ohio. So what I do with my lid.
We have a lot of questions about that guy, Roger.
Okay, fire away. I'm ready.
Well, when you say this little guy, does that mean it's a boy?
Actually, that was a girl. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I slip sometimes. It's I use guy and gang and boys as a for all girls.
Yeah.
So, yes, that was a girl crayfish, and when I brought her home, she laid eggs. But keeping a crayfish at home is not like a crayfish in the wild. In the wild, that crayfish lives in clean, cold spring water. And at home, you can't do that at home. And I'm afraid all of her eggs died. So they didn't survive. It's very sad.
Now, Pryor wants to know, are you going to let her go?
That specimen will be preserved in ethyl alcohol and deposited at the Ohio State University Museum as a record that will be there for hundreds and hundreds of years. I go to museums and I look at crayfish specimens a lot, and it turns out that these specimens that people preserve are extremely important. If I didn't have preserved specimens at the museum, I would have never been able to start to put together a book on the crayfishes of Ohio, and you guys would have never been able to get a book that would tell you what you're catching in your creek. And always I have to go to museums and look at specimens when I'm trying to figure out if something is a new species, undescribed or not. And that it's very important to describe a species, because without a name on something, it's very difficult to preserve it or save it or protect it. So what we have to do as biologists is we have to tell everybody what lives out there in the world so that they can then make an effort to keep it from going extinct. And there's a lot of really rare crayfish that need to be protected. So it's I don't always release specimens. Once I bring a specimen home, that's as good as it's going to have to be preserved, because it's really difficult to release them back into nature. And I would advise this to everyone out there: never, never, never release a crayfish into the wild. If you've got a crayfish, you can't turn it loose, because if you do, that crayfish may establish a population that could damage the native species and possibly make a species go extinct. So if you've got a crayfish and you want to put it to sleep, the best way to do that is to put it in a Ziploc bag and put it in the freezer. Crayfish do not mind cold temperatures. Cold temperatures do not bother them. They will sit in the freezer and slowly cool down until they pass away. So if you have to euthanize your crayfish, do it by putting them in the freezer. And I think your mom would be like, okay, let's put it in a bag and not let it run around amongst the peas and beans and, frozen hamburger. So any other questions?
Oh, there are plenty of questions. Yes. Let's see. Going back to the blue crayfish, Nora asked, is there a reason that they're coming to Ohio?
Well, here's what we believe happened with that blue crayfish. Many, many years ago, and if I could share my screen, I'm sharing it now, aren't I? Let me show you something. So, where's what happened to my, hold on. Many years ago, the rivers in Ohio looked very different than they look right now. Okay, so in Ohio, there were a lot of rivers that ran through the state, and then the glaciers, big old glaciers, came down and covered the state. There was a big, hold on, let me see, I hope I can do this. From right about here, all the way across Ohio, the state was covered with ice from the glaciers. And all these rivers, like this river right here, that flowed that way, and these rivers that used to flow that way, they all got, in this river that used to flow that way, they all got reversed. In other words, the ice dammed them up, and this river in particular had to start flowing this way. All right? Well, right here, there was a divide. Before the glaciers came down, this river used to go north, and this river went south. When the glaciers backed them up, this river switched and started flowing this way and eroded a channel right through here. Well, at the time the glaciers came down, over in this part of the world is where that blue crayfish had lived, or does live. And prior to when those glaciers arrived, which was, you know, somewhere shortly less than 1 million years ago, some of those blue crayfish were had migrated over to here. And then when the glaciers came and the rivers flowed, it cut them off right there. So this population is now isolated from this population, and it hasn't really expanded much. It just lives right in this little area down in here. So they didn't come recently. They actually got here thousands of years ago, and we just found them. It took us a long time to find them. Okay, so that is basically, am I back on the main set there? Yeah. So that is how they got here. Many thousands of years ago, they got here. So they've just been sitting there like all these things around us. They've been living where they've been living for ages and ages. So they go way back in history. There's a lot of history here. Any other questions, or should I show another species?
Oh, Roger, we have tons and tons of questions. So
okay, let's keep working on the questions. I'm gonna while we're doing that, I'm gonna show you another species. This one's particularly neat. This is an undescribed species. This is new. I just found this a couple years ago while staying at a cabin in the mountains of Kentucky. This does not have a name, okay? It's undescribed. I don't know what I'm going to call it, but we'll try and come up with something catchy. It's red and blue is another burrower. So questions, by the way?
Yeah, so I know we had a question actually about red crayfish and are there any black crayfish? So since you mentioned red, let's see, where did that question go?
Crayfish.
There are? Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, well, I can't find the one about the red. Oh yeah, are there any red species of crawfish?
Yes. Yes. There are. There's one here in Ohio that's not supposed to live here. It's called the red swamp crayfish, but this is a red one. It's more kind of a reddish brown than a real bright red. And I don't have any live specimens of the red ones around, but there is one called the red swamp crayfish. And it is not native to Ohio, but you will find populations. You could find one out in your local park somewhere. It's been getting introduced around the state, and there's a giant population of them up in Sandusky Bay. They've really expanded their populations up there, and they dig in the ground. And but this is I brought this one up mostly because it's another one of those undescribed species that I've discovered that doesn't have a name yet, and I got to figure out what to do with it. I'll have to write a paper about it. But yeah, there's red ones. There's just about every color you can think of. There's yellow. There's one out in Missouri that's a beautiful yellow color with black spots.
Ooh.
Then there's
Okay.
one. There's some that are black and white. You're black with white stripes on their tail. It's just there's a lot of variation in crayfish colors.
Okay, so we had Maggie from Houston, and she asked, "What is the biggest crayfish?" Avea also asked, "How big can they get?" So we have people wondering about how large, and then Nitera asked, "How long do they live?" And I think we had Nora, or no, not Nora. Somebody asked, Abigail asked, "What's the most common type?" So can you go over the biggest, the most common, and how long they live?
All right. When it comes to big, you have to go to Australia because everything in Australia is weird. And in Australia, on a little island, well, it's not little, but on an island on the south end of Australia called Tasmania. You've heard of the Tasmanian devil and crazy things like that. There's a crayfish down there that gets almost 3 feet long. It is giant, and it gets like 5 or 6 pounds. It's a monstrous crayfish. It's so big that the people that lived in Australia used to have them for Christmas dinner, which was not good for the crayfish because it takes them a long time to get that big, and they almost became extinct until people were like, okay, we probably better hadn't eat these for dinner anymore. But they're giant things. Now, here in North America, our biggest crayfish there are 2 species, and they're called the bottle brush crayfish because on their on their antennae coming out of their head, they have all these hairs sticking out like a bottle brush, and they get like 8-9 inches. They're a very big crayfish. So around here, the biggest ones are the bottle brush. They get about 9 or 10 inches. And here in Ohio, it's kind of hard to say because there's 3 species that all get to be about the same size. There's the rusty crayfish, there's the big water crayfish, and then there's the painted hand mud bug. And they all get over 6 inches. They all get up to 7, possibly 8 inches when they're really, really old. And I'll tell you one thing, those big crayfish can administer a powerful pinch. So, so be careful.
Well,
now, how long do they live?
That reminds me, somebody did ask, what happens if they pinch you?
Well, if they're big enough, you bleed. And they have a rather nasty habit of they'll pinch you, and you'll try and get their pincher loose. And while you're getting their pincher loose, their other pincher comes up and pinches you there. So they pinch you there, then they let go here, and you start messing with that one, and then they come up and they pinch you again. The best way to get a crayfish loose, of course, most people go like this, ow! And then the crayfish goes flying, and the pincher of the crayfish breaks off. Okay? So if you don't want your crayfish to lose its pinchers, you take the crayfish, you put it in water. And as soon as that crayfish is in enough water to cover it up, like in a bucket or something, it will let go and try to swim away. And that's a much more effective way to get them loose. I've had some, though. I had one that got a hold of me and would not let go, and I had to basically rip it off. And it really, it really made a big hole in me. So, yeah.
So Maddie from Long Island had asked, can you hold it by its tail? So is that a good way to hold it?
The best way to hold a crayfish is to grab it right behind the pinchers, right like that, okay? That way you keep the pinchers from getting at you because that crayfish is going to want to pinch you. So you grab it right behind the head, right like that, okay? So just grab right there and you've got it. If you grab back here, they will reach around with their pinchers and get you, okay? So You don't want to grab them too far back. Now, this is a particularly docile species, so I'm not too worried about it. It's not very aggressive. For some reason, these ones that burrow, like these colorful ones, they're not very aggressive, and they don't really try and tear you up too much. But the best way to do it is right behind the head there. So somebody asked how long they live, okay? So if a crayfish lives in a cave, which is like living in a refrigerator, they can live 22 years, all right? Now, I have been keeping crayfish in my basement for a long time, and I have had crayfish live 16 years in my basement. Crayfish, I brought them home as eggs, and they hatched, and I kept one, and it lived. I made a nice little tank for it with mud, and it was a burrower. These burrowers seem to live longer than the ones that live in the stream, by the way. If you catch one from a stream, it might live 5 years. But these burrowers seem to live a very long time. And I had one that I kept for 16 years. So
that is awesome. Hey, we have 3 minutes left, and we did get a video from one of our viewers today, I think from New York maybe. And so we wanted to share her clip before we end today. I do have one more question after this quick clip for you, Roger. So we will be back to you in just a minute. But Jenna is going to share the clip from our viewer of a crayfish crawling. So here we go. Thank you for sending this in.
This is from Ashley, who, if I remember correctly, is in Brooklyn, New York. And she and her family found this crayfish. So that's kind of cool that you can see how they go. They're on.
Awesome. Look at him.
Nice.
Or her. I'm not sure.
So,
and then, Roger, I want to ask a question from somebody that said, what happens when a crayfish is missing a leg?
Crayfish lose appendages all the time. The cool thing about crayfish is they can regenerate their legs. So sometimes you'll be out and you'll catch a crayfish and have a big claw and a small claw. The big claw is probably the original, and the small one is a regenerated pincher or keelie. So they lose their legs, but they immediately start regrowing them. Sometimes you'll find a crayfish missing a leg, and there'll be a little tiny little white stump sticking out. And that's the new leg starting to grow. And every time they molt, that leg will get bigger and bigger. And they do this with their antennae. All their appendages can regenerate.
Okay, and we have just 1 minute left. So I'm going, just yes or no, is there a species of hairy crayfish? We have a viewer ask that question.
There are crayfish in the Gulf of Mexico area down in Alabama and Mississippi that have very hairy pinchers. They have lots of hairs on their pinchers, but they don't have a lot of hair on their body. Well, they do have hairs, but they're very, very small, and they're not easily seen. So in terms of hairiness, most of that hairiness is confined to the antennae and the pinchers.
Okay, and we are just about out of time, but Abigail said that for the crayfish you haven't named yet, she thinks you should name it something like bobber pinchers. So we are going to have to end on that note there. Thank you, Roger, for joining us. Thank you, Heather and Jenna, and congrats to our crawfish, biggest crawfish derby winner. That was so fun. And we have another program coming up in 10 minutes. We hope to see you there, and we're going to be talking about clean water. And this is going to be part 2 out of our 3 segments that make up the crawfish derby, or the Crawdad derby. And thank you to all the Girl Scouts. We had so many great questions. Thanks for celebrating Girl Scouts Love State Parks weekend with us. Bye.
Thanks, guys.